Let's talk about another weirdo in the history of ideas and religion, philosophy. So I'm going to try to make the story a bit human so that all of us can kind of find it somewhat relevant, applicable to our lives to some extent. You got a guy who's really, really, really rich. And he, in fact, is like a prince or a king of this village. And he has a wife. They're both very cute. One day he goes home. His wife had just come out of the showers. She looks really hot, and they have sex. So the woman feels a little funny. She goes to Kaiser. She sees her doctor. And the doctor says to her, "Oh, you had sex." And the woman says, "Well, yes." "You're pregnant?" "Yes, I think so." "Good for you." So she's walking home really, really, really happy. I'm not talking about today where you all of a sudden accidentally find out that you're pregnant and you're horrified. It's like a nightmare. You try to figure out what else to do with yourself. So the woman is walking home to share the good news with her husband. And as she's walking home, she runs into this woman, really weird. She looks at this mom-to-be and says, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" "How do you know? Do I know you?" "No, I'm a magician," she says. "You are pregnant. And you are going to have a son. I don't believe you," the mother-to-be says. So this old magical woman looks at this young pregnant woman and says, "When you were 2, you did this. And when you were 5, you did this other thing. When you were 18, you did this." And all the things that were secrets, this magician tells her. And all of a sudden, this mother-to-be says, "Oh, she knows." And so the mother-to-be looks at this old woman and says, "Aren't you happy for me?" "No, I'm actually quite sad for you, because your child is going to be a son, and your son is either going to hate you or hate you some more." I don't know if any of you in this class are mothers. Imagine if you had a child, from the moment he opened his eyes, he looked at you and said, "Yuck, why you're my mother? I hate you." You haven't done anything to this poor kid, but this kid expresses such intense hatred and dislike for you. The poor woman asks, "Is there anything I can do for my son to love me instead of hate me?" He says, "Yes, of course." "What is it?" "Make sure that your son never sees, never experiences, is never touched by the realities of life. As long as he continues to take the blue pill, if you've seen The Matrix, he'll always wake up in his bed and he can think whatever. He'll be happy. As long as he can live in the cave, he can fall in love with the shadows, he can be like a salmon fish who never goes back home, he'll be happy." So the woman, both frightened as well as joyous, goes to her husband and says, "Listen, I ran into this old woman. It may be difficult for you to believe, but she knows me so well. She told me about my past, things that I haven't even told you, my husband. She just told me that if you want our kid to grow up to be healthy and for him to love us, you need to make sure that realities of life never enter his psyche." So what do the parents do? They build a city for him, just for him. It's always clean. No one ever suffers. No one ever has a toothache. No one ever throws up. No one ever dies. No one ever gets old. No one goes hungry. No one is homeless. Every single person in this town is under the age 25. And they're very, very, very attractive, because instinctually, your body will tell you who's ugly and who's attractive. You don't need a book for that. You don't need Jesus Christ for that. Your body will tell you. It's like your nose will tell you if you pass by a restaurant, if a food is yucky, or wow, maybe I should go and give it a shot. Now, for those of us in this class who are parents or will eventually become parents, this is what you should know. It doesn't matter how rotten you are and how rotten your life has been. The moment you find out that you are pregnant and you in fact do decide to keep this child, you will make all these plans. You may live in the worst neighborhood, but you will say to yourself, "I am going to force my man to get a better job. We're going to pack and we're going to go to Montclair. We're going to buy a house or rent an apartment in a nice neighborhood where my kids don't see homelessness, poverty, injustice, where the environment is clean. People use good language. They speak well. They dress well. They smell well." That's what all of us do. It's like when you buy a brand new car, you give it a shower every goddamn day. Then after 3 weeks, you say, I'll just wash it tomorrow. Tomorrow turns into a month and a year. And then you have dings and scratches all over the place. You just don't care. All parents, what you have in the story is the following. All parents, regardless of your race, gender, culture, time, history, you will do whatever you possibly can to keep your children safe from harm's way. It's not up to you. The moment you are a mother, you're a cougar. What time does to you as a parent, that's a completely different story. Time makes all of us callous, casual. Now, because you have a king, and remember, all parents are kings and queens, because their main task is to protect their kids. Will society eventually steal our kids? Absolutely. Will society eventually contaminate our children? Definitely. Will our kids eventually become hoodlums? Definitely. Completely contaminated, corrupt? Yeah. Will they become like a prodigal son? Absolutely. Will you live long enough to see your son coming home begging for forgiveness? Probably not. Imagine, if you can, for a moment, what happens to a human being who has never experienced pain. There was this episode on Prince of Bel-Air. They're driving, and I think they're driving his father's car, a Mercedes. It's a silver, gray, and they get pulled over. And he rolls the window down, and it's a white cop. And eventually they're cuffed, they're put in a cell. A couple days pass by, and the father comes in. And so he gets to the police office and says, release my kids, otherwise you'll have the biggest lawsuit on your hand. They drive back home, and now they're in his mansion. Will Smith always knew that they got pulled over for one simple reason: they were black. Will Smith knew. He tried to convince Carlton, but Carlton never knew what racism is. He always loved diversity. He always felt as if no one will ever do anything wrong. So when they got pulled over and sent into a cell, Carlton would always say, it has to be for a good reason. Will, you are wrong. The cop is not racist. And then at the end of the show, Carlton stands in front of his father and says, Dad, is the cop racist? And the father looks at him, says nothing, and walks away. And Carlton stands there all by himself and has to wrestle with this question. Is there a thing called racism? Is it real? Does it happen? For the first time, at the age of 20, 25, 30, 40, Carlton is forced to examine his history. All the people he had forgiven, all the people he thought were good intentioned, now he has to examine all of them. And it's too much. And of course the show ends and none of us in this class know how things take place inside him. But what you need to understand is this. For 18 long years, the Buddha does not see anyone in pain, doesn't see his parents struggle to make money, doesn't see anyone unattractive, unpleasant. So one day, this kid whose name is Siddhartha, and the name in Sanskrit means someone who pursues physical desires. And that's all of us. Look at the way all of us in this class function. Whenever there is a pain in our life, we try to wrestle with it, we try to get rid of it. We fail to see that pain really is the dominant character and attribute of life. It doesn't matter where you go, it's always going to be there. You can't get rid of it. One day, this young kid is walking around and accidentally he sees someone like me. Wrinkles, back is hunched a little, hair is gone, my voice is tired, I look tired, and this kid, Siddhartha, looks at me and says, "That'll happen to you. What's wrong with you?" "What do you mean?" "Why do you look like that? Those lines around your eyes and mouth and this and that, where'd they come from?" "What do you mean?" So the question is this. It's a kid who's never seen someone like me. And this old man looks at this kid and says, "It's called old age. I am Siddhartha, I'm a prince. I'm not gonna get old, I'm a prince." "No, you'll get old, just wait." Talk about trauma. So this kid goes home and asks his parents, "Dad, I ran into this guy who's old." Now here's the thing you need to understand about trauma. You internalize an experience. And when I say internalize, it goes inside your soul. You don't just think about it. In fact, you can't think about it because it makes no sense. My father just hit me. Your thinking apparatus shuts down. It's just all feelings. How do you make sense of it? I see people who are old. My father is 90. He's slowly beginning to forget things. He's in a great shape, much better shape than me. And when I see someone who's old, I should say to myself, now Amir, you're also getting a little older. Maybe you should use your time differently. To internalize comes a sense of urgency, conflict. I am 20, I have all this power, I'm going to get old, my power will do nothing for me to keep old age away. For the first time he comes to realize his father doesn't have any answers. His mother doesn't have any answers. The priests don't have any answers. See, you have friends. When you run into difficulties, you pick up your phone, you call them, you text them. Maybe you can go to Barnes & Nobles and purchase a self-help book. The Buddha has no place to go except to sit in his room and wrestle. What does old age really mean? When you come to understand that all that books can give you is information, and you no longer need information, you realize that the 5-story building in Berkeley called UC Berkeley Library, the entire 5 floors become completely irrelevant for you. How could it be? Billions of books in a building, not one can help you because you're not looking for information. You're not looking for inspiration. He wants to get rid of old age completely. You know Gilgamesh? I don't want to be forgotten. How do you do that? And so he doesn't have any answers. Just kind of walking around town aimlessly. And then he runs into the same old man. But now some things about the old man has changed. He's coughing, and his coughing got blood. What is wrong with you? Again, this kid asks. You know, when you get old, you get sick. What the hell is that? A good friend of ours, Dr. Freud, Sigmund Freud, had mentioned some time ago that all of us in this class would eventually get to a place where you realize you've had one very, very, very faithful friend. It's not God, it's not your spouse, it's not your children, it's your body. You desire something with your eyes. A message is sent to your brain. Your legs begin to move, and once you reach it, your hand stretched out. Then you grab it with your fingers. Then you put it to your mouth. Without your body, your desires cannot be fulfilled. But when you get sick physically, I really want a cup of coffee. My legs take me there, but now I'm exhausted. Or maybe I'm not exhausted. I drink the coffee, but my digestive system is no longer the way it used to be in my 20s or 30s or 40s. I drink it now. Then I throw up. And I come to this grim realization. I have lots of desires, but my body is no longer accompanying me. It's feeling me, betraying me. How the hell do you internalize that? I'm not talking as a piece of information just sitting there. It lives inside you. See, we can talk about racism in this class, but when you get pulled over because of your skin color, it's no longer a piece of information. It's no longer a conversation. You feel it in your gut, and you're enraged, and you're angry, and you want justice, but you can't have it because you got no power. I have no power over old age, and I have no power over getting sick. Again, he goes to his dad and says, Dad, what the hell is sickness, man? You send me to school, you give me money, you give me a Tesla, you give me a wife, you give me a husband, you give me this, you give me that, but you never tell me about old age. What's wrong with you? All the money you give me, will it protect me against old age? What can the father say? I'm not telling you the life story of the Buddha. This is our story. Remember what we talked about, epics. Epics is about the human condition. The life of Siddhartha is an epical story. Not a single one of us in this classroom exempt from it. We are metaphorically the Siddharthas. Now, if I was to put this in the context of modernity, women look at old age and feel about old age very, very, very differently than men do. Go to Nordstrom, go to the makeup aisle. Women internalize old age. It's a nightmare for them. And so we also create a culture that says, it is true that every wrinkle you have has a story in it, but you are, above all, a physical animal remain physical, remain an animal, be attractive so people can look at you and give you relevance and meaning and value. Now you need to understand what happens to the psychology of this young kid when he's introduced to the reality of old age and sickness. I may be attracted to her, but I ask myself, is she eventually going to get old? Is she eventually get wrinkles and become unattractive? If I want to be with her, why do I allow my senses to guide me? I want to fall in love with a human being who lives on the inside. I don't want to fall in love with her skin. I don't want to fall in love with her eyes, with her body. She must have something on her interior that does not age. And all of a sudden, the Buddha comes to realize he has been held hostage by the five senses. The eyes tell him what is attractive. The eyes deceive him. It's what the Hindus call the world of Maya, shadows on the wall. You get information, you piece them together nicely, you're very knowledgeable, and you assume that knowledge is equal to wisdom, and it's not. But that's your shadow, that's your mirage, that's your fantasy about yourself. Because I know the ins and outs of the Bible, I am a Christian, or a Muslim, or a Buddhist. That's not the case. The Buddha walks out, remember, wrestling with all those ideas and the emotions that come with it. We're not just talking about ideas to internalize anything. You see it, you think about it, and then all of a sudden you have the eruption of emotions. And the presence of emotions, you feel paralyzed. Your intellect comes down to figure this out, but you can't. He goes out, and this time he sees something even worse. The same man that he had seen be old, being sick, is now just laying flat on the ground. And he kneels and taps him on the shoulder and says, Bob, can you get up? I got some questions for you. Bob remains unmoved, pushes him violently. Get up, man, I got questions for you. And after a while, someone goes to him and says, kid, listen, he's dead. Dead? What the hell is that? That's the end of the road for all human beings. You're born, you get old, you get sick, and then the fuel is out, you die. So what happens in death? Nothing. Non-existent. You're gone. But I have money. Doesn't matter. Power. Doesn't matter. I'm a prince. Matters very little. All of us in this class have seen old age and sickness and death. Some of us may even have internalized, but it's a passing thing. We forget. We go back into life. That's what we do. And life is profoundly powerful. It puts the human being back to sleep. We become unreflective. And we say, yes, I will get old, but maybe a century from now, I will get sick, maybe even die. But it's not internalized. Let me share with you a story. I totaled my car on the Bay Bridge in the 1990s. I had no idea how I survived. But when I got out, I said, you know what? I'm going to live my life completely differently. I didn't. That moment of inspiration lasted for maybe a couple of days. So when we talk about the stories in this class, whether it's Gilgamesh or the Buddha or the Malcolm X, you need to understand these are superhuman beings. They don't forget. This virus called realities of life, it contaminates their software. The Buddha can't go back being a prince. Why are we attracted to people, certain people? Here's the fourth experience that Siddhartha has. He's seen old age, he's seen sickness, he's seen death. As he's walking, and he can no longer laugh because he is consumed by the realities awaiting him. He sees this monk, this tiny little fellow, walking around, and he has a grin on his face. And the Buddha, this Siddhartha, goes to him and says, what are you smiling about? Don't you know that you will get old, you will get sick, and you will die, and you'll be forgotten? Do you know how much pain there is in all of that? And this kid says, I have come to understand life, living, death. It's okay. I can laugh at the whole thing because it's a joke. All of life is a joke. My parents did not plan for me, but my father loved my mom, and by that I mean he loved to have sex with my mom, and he did. I am the outcome. I'm not planned. My parents are not the sort of people who sit and reflect. Should we have children? How are we going to raise them? What sort of society do we live in? What's the impact of society on the psyches of our kids? Parents don't think that way. If you were to think about things deeply, none of us in this class would do anything because nothing really makes sense and nothing really has that much value. Now, no one can save you from old age, no one can save you from sickness, and no one can save you from death. But let me give this a different twist. This is my 4th cup of coffee of the day. Every night before going to bed, I make the coffee. All I gotta do the moment I wake up is push the button. And man, I wait for it to make this beeping sound. And then I grab my cup and I put this cup to my mouth and it's paradise. It was fresh. This, my taste buds, remember the taste of the coffee from this morning. I wasn't looking forward to this. I just made it. It's my habit. It's a brand new, fresh coffee, freshly brewed. But my taste bud says, it's an old taste. It's not as interesting. And when I drink, it doesn't give me pleasure. I say to myself, put it down, don't drink anymore. You know why? It sickens me now. And when this class is over in a couple of minutes, I'm going to toss the rest of it in that beautiful garden that Lainey has had for the past 20 years. And here's a very, very depressing thought. Everything that you touch, there's a freshness to it, then it gets old. Then it sickens you. It suffocates you. It's no longer as interesting. It clutters your physical life, emotional life, intellectual life. Then there comes a point where you say, I just don't want to be around it. It's dead to you. Where can you go? What can you touch that can escape this reality of life? You want to get married. Oh, it's beautiful. You will plan plans. You will invite friends. You will go looking for gowns and suits. What sort of cards you should send. Where you should have your wedding. Then you'll feel exhausted. Then you say, I want this day to come and go quickly because I don't want to do this anymore. How could something so exciting, inspirational, all of a sudden sicken you? Where you say, I want it to come and go quickly, I'm tired. I mean, when I think about Zachary's deep dish, spinach, mushroom, pesto, I begin to salivate like Pavlov's dog. But after eating one slice, I really want to throw up. And then I say, why did I come here in the first place? A small deep dish is like 50 bucks. Am I crazy? Imagine yourself internalizing these 3 realities of life, where everything gets old, everything gets sick, and it becomes irrelevant to you. Where are you gonna go? What's meaningful to you? What really matters? There is a reason why only a few people, and by few I mean maybe 5, maybe 10, in the entire history of the human race, only pursue the spiritual quest. Because finding yourself completely meaningless and finding life completely meaningless is enormously traumatic, painful. I mean, look at the things that we do. Take yourself to one of these fancy restaurants. You know, you go to Costco, Safeway, you buy this big bucket of salad, 10 bucks. Now go to a fancy restaurant. They give you 1 lettuce leaf, 1, with some ridiculous sauce on it, some cheese on it, and it costs you like 25 bucks. Realities of life are really quite devastating when you reflect and internalize them. You will feel enormously powerless, irrelevant, it's insignificant. Shakespeare calls people like me fools, idiots, clowns, coming on the stage, screaming, ranting about this and that. For what? It's nothing, just air. Some of you may enjoy the story, some of you may enjoy the way I tell the story, but I know life is busy. You will forget. You will try to remember, you won't be able to. You don't have the support system. Life means too much to you. I do this only for a paycheck, nothing more. I'm just a bit animated, and I get excited. When the Buddha comes, or Siddhartha comes to realize none of this stuff makes any sense, and life is just stupid, for the first time he feels homeless. He's got no parents. Parents are there to support you, to give you comfort in times of crisis. He's unreachable. He doesn't care if it's a prince, king, or a slave, white or black or blue. None of those things really make any difference for him anymore. Like Gilgamesh, he says, I want to understand if there is a way. I want to know if there's a way out of sickness, old age, and death. We are pleasure-seeking animals. And whatever gives you pleasure, you will do what you can to prolong it, make sure it lasts long, long time. One of the nice things about the teacher-student relationship is that you're not falling in love with your teacher's eyes or hair or nose or body. You're falling in love with something that's indescribable, untouchable, unreachable. It's a pleasure that lasts for a long time. Why do we keep writing books about Jesus? No one knows who the hell he was. So we keep writing, imagining, fantasizing. Now that's a pleasure worth having, because it never grows old or sick or dies. It's like eternal. Read Daughter of Fire. She falls in love with this teacher, and that love just doesn't diminish. It's like life can't touch it. You know why? Because she doesn't fall in love with his physical body. She doesn't fall in love with his ideas. What she falls in love with is a body and a set of ideas that is connected to this man's soul. And the soul is untouchable by life. And I suppose I would say, would we have Buddhism if we didn't have an old man who gave this kid these experiences? And if this kid did not have the proper station where he would receive, internalize, reflect, only to reach a dark space, and then have a good amount of longing and yearning, go into seclusion, become a Hindu, only to realize Hinduism sucks, speaking sucks, thinking sucks, visualizing sucks, doing yoga, everything that Hinduism talks about is ridiculous and irrelevant. And that is ultimately how students, the place where students must reach. You have to become completely empty of everything. And in that void, which is profoundly difficult and painful, something happens. What happens, I don't really know. But there is the breakthrough, if you can stay in it for a while, patiently. I always tell students who have had certain experiences, don't think about them, don't talk about them, don't write about them, hold them inside. Allow pressure to build up. If you want to scream, find a goddamn well. Go to the mountains, sit in your car and scream. Let no one hear you. You now have what every worthy student goes through, which is called the great renunciation. You don't just walk away from your job, you don't just walk away from your husband, your wife, you don't just walk away from your house. You divorce everything that life is about, everything. You walk away from everything. For one simple reason, everything eventually dies. You lose interest. If any of you in this class want to find a way not to lose interest in your life, you need to make sure you approach things with your soul. Make sure whatever you touch, you can't contaminate. And the only way you can do that is if the other thing you're approaching has more power than you. If you're more attached to it than it is attached to you. The great renunciation. You walk away from everything. And you do it willingly. No one's going to force you. And you do it because you understand